Well, it's like that wall is a whiteboard too. You got this big thing coming out of here to move around.
I was gonna say, sure, you'd be like, you can't do it right down there.
DCRUP will start in 1 minute. Stop eating the newcomer food and sit down.
Eat it before it gets stale, right?
Probably too late for that. Kurt, can you take notes for this?
Yes, I can take notes for this.
Thank you.
And Jog, we had JavaScript.
Anybody want to be a Jabber scribe? We have a note taker. You get a free gift.
Oh. All right. Yes. Check this out. Oh, my. Oh, wow. I messed this up.
What?
I need to put this somewhere so I can sign. Thank you, sir.
Raising the bar for the rest of us here. Okay.
I thought these things were already passé, so that's why they gave them out here.
Don't do this while doing presentations. That's not fast.
You are getting very sleepy.
Okay. Is that cyclical curve?
Orbital.
Yeah, actually, they light up in different patterns. It's a rave in your hand, man.
If you can figure out the sequence, you can read our email.
All right. Okay, this is DCRUP. If you are not looking for DCRUP, you're in the wrong room. Blue sheets are Blue sheets are circulating. I believe we have a scribe who is Kurt. Sorry, no, Kurt is taking minutes, and our Java scribe is Yov. Thank you very much. Introduction. Okay, yeah, welcome to DCRUP, the first meeting. You all know Murray, and some of you know me. I come from the security side of things. There was a charter tweak. You may have noticed this was merely because I noticed we weren't chartered to actually deprecate SHA-1, and so I asked Alexi to start that. I realized in retrospect that was probably needlessly pedantic, but I like putting him to work. Please note, the note well, as Barry likes to say, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used by the IETF. You have the right to consult with your attorney about your obligations and other privileges about intellectual property. This is the formal version. Note that the RFC numbers have changed. A new version of BCP 79 has issued. That's the RFC 8179. Mostly it's the boilerplate is the same though. So 15 minutes, John, you have the floor. What?
No, please use the box. Okay. Snake box, fit box. All right.
We seem to have one open technical question. The original, this is the part of the charter that I don't think we have changed, is to add new signing techniques to DKIM. And there have been 2 and perhaps 3 of them. One is to add hashed keys for RSA because as we all know, there are bugs in DNS provisioning that makes it foolishly difficult to publish a key that doesn't fit in a single 256 byte text string, and RSA keys bigger than 1K bits don't do that. So the thought is we could do what other crypto protocols do and publish a 256-bit hash and put the key itself in the signature. That's technically straightforward. As far as I can tell, there is no disagreement about that. And Scott says he's working on implementing it. I think Murray said he would look at it. I know I'm looking at it for the Perl stuff. Okay, the second thing is to add elliptic curve signatures. Again, I don't think there's any disagreement about that. We seem to agree that we're doing what's called pure ED DSA, which is ED25519, without an extra level of hashing in the signatures. That's okay. And the contentious question is, do we also want to add a hashed, or instead do we want to add a hashed version of the EDDSA signatures? Now the hash, in this case, there's no operational advantages. The hash is the same size as the signature, and the signature is small enough that even if a future elliptical curve algorithm had keys twice as big or even 4 times as big, it would still fit in a single text string. So my personal preference is that since a hashed elliptical curve key adds no operational advantage, and since in DKIM, since there is no negotiation between the sender and the receiver, a receiver must implement every possible crypto scheme that any sender might use to interoperate. I would rather minimize the number of schemes and just add 2 rather than 3.
So, Martin Thompson. There is actually potentially a security benefit to hashing. And that is that when you hash, you end up putting the public key in the message that you're sending. And as a consequence of that, that public key is then covered by the signature. And there are various ways in which signatures are used, but one of the less obvious properties of signatures is that if you generate a signature over something, then it is possible, certainly in RSA and maybe in some of the elliptic curve variants, to generate a key that will validate with that same signature. So you can generate a message, sign it, and then I can claim to have sent that message. Whether or not that's interesting or an attack that actually makes sense in this context is something that would require like a huge amount of analysis. But I'm just pointing out the potential here for us to gain some additional defense against people switching keys out for messages.
Okay, yeah, just operationally, we've had these signatures for a decade, and I don't think anybody's mentioned this issue until this month. So if it's a practical problem, it appears to be a pretty low level one.
It may be a pretty low level one. I'll also point out that you've been signing messages with 512-bit RSA signatures, and no one's really made much of a fuss about that either. So that's not really a persuasive argument for me.
Phil Hornbaker. Yeah, I think I need to see a example of quite what's been alleged here, in that yes, there are some games that you can play, but that's kind of the reason that Dorothy Deming pointed out that we needed to have the hash in the signature in the first place. But that's what. So I was a big proponent of hashes because you can make the configuration experience easier for the user because, hashes, you can make them small enough to be. But then again, when I started to look into what you would want to manage, a DNS zone or whatever, basically, I don't think that it actually does you any good, because what you probably want to have is some tool that is organizing your hashes and your keys anyway. And so it's not going to, you should not be having to cut and paste the keys into the DNS zone file anyway. So that advantage went away. So I support just doing the raw key.
Yeah, just for people who aren't familiar with DKIM, the unhashed keys are not going away anytime soon, just for backwards compatibility.
Yeah. So I'm channeling Jim Fenton, saying, if we are trying to minimize the number of things that need to interoperate, do we need both hashing and elliptic curve? Aren't they two ways of solving the same problem?
So just to take what I think Martin's argument was, Eric Riscola, about the potential vulnerability, which I also don't know how to exploit, is that say we had some situation where a message was referred to, where you have an existing published message, and what I want to do is I want to claim ownership of that message, and I can't change the message, but I can publish my own stuff in DNS. So what you do is you basically make a new key which generates a signature on the message, and then you publish that in DNS, and somehow you convince them it's one of those two to correspond to. So say I don't know how to do that, but that would be the thing Martin's concerned about.
You would have to put it in the same zone as the real key. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
True. Just a clarification, you're not actually claiming
Ownership of the message, right? Because it's not like an S-MIME signature on the content.
You're claiming ownership of the thing that's being signed. This is exactly the same. This is exactly the exact same issue Air found in Acme, right? It's the same underlying issue. So right. I certainly I guess it seems to me that like the natural thing to do if you want to minimize the number of things you have to do, and you know we have to hash RSA, is to say let us go forward hashing all the time. And then I appreciate that like 1024-bit RSA is on its way is potentially on its way out, but it was taking a long time to vanish. But at some point, which may not be too far in the future, we may get the point where people where the large volume messages you receive have two signatures on them, one of which is either EC or hashed RSA, at which point you can simply say, well, I'm tired of supporting 1024 RSA. And because you don't have to accept anything in particular, and because what happens when you don't accept it, you simply ignore it, then this isn't like receiving H.264 where you're like don't have internet video. If you like decide don't want to take H.264, it's simply a matter of you don't get like the DKIM validity. And so it's perfectly easy to examine the market and say, well, we're now at 78% of my messages are one of these two modern things, and I just don't care about 24 hours anymore. So so now you have to process the long tail. So I think what I would advocate for is simply saying we are consistently hashing, and then at some point, not in the distant future, which as I say probably isn't that far away, then you could just throw away the non-hash code path. So if we're trying to minimize code paths, that's actually the thing to do. Because as I say, we have to if we think anybody's going to do hashed RSA, then we have to have hashing.
And you're talking, when you're using the term hashing, you mean like hash the content and sign and then.
Oh, negative. I'm saying if the issue is about whether the keys ought to be hashed or not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Then consistently hashing is the thing that will lead you in the future to have only one code path.
Yeah, Martin Thompson. Whether or not the signing over the key is of value or not, I think that we have to consider the fact that the future is much bigger than the past. And as Eka points out, we have evidence to suggest that this is something that we don't have to worry about the long tail. So I agree with Eka.
Anyone else on this topic?
Yeah, I would just say, I think I've talked to everybody who is doing an implementation. I don't think any of us see a meaningful simplification in doing two hashes. Is that fair?
So I'm not going to lie down on the road on this one.
Yeah.
I think if people implementing this want to avoid the extra step, then that's fine. I'm a little concerned about the signing of the key. I think there's some value in that. That's part of the reason why we sign over identities in TLS and various other protocols. But again, like I said, couldn't pin anything to it.
I guess I will say that upon consideration, I don't think it's worth having two forms of the EDDSA. So I think while I would prefer to hash all the time, and be clear, I guess to be clear, hash the key all the time, the public key all the time. If people don't think we should do that, then I think the answer is to do hashed RSA and unhashed. So my rank order would be hashed key always, hashed key for RSA, unhashed key for EDDSA. Finally hashing and unhashing for EDSA and hashed RSA. Because I think I agree that is silly.
Yes. I think I almost agree with you, except for the order.
You invert the order,
except for perhaps the order of some of the preferences.
Right.
I also agree fewer is better.
Right. So I think I guess I'm willing to defer. I think again, it might be worth taking the sense of the room, but I'm willing to defer to the sense of the room, like flying another road.
There's one other thing to consider. The only other thing to consider is that if we have to go post-quantum on this one, then we're going to have large keys. Those are going to be hashed. Most likely. I mean, this is all rather speculative, but you know, one of the techniques that the post-quantum ones use is rather large.
Yeah, they're all likely to be large. If we have to go post-quantum, most likely TLS is going to be leading the way on that anyway, right?
Yeah, and
Martin, before you go,
just one comment. That, like, you're absolutely right, but if we have to go post-quantum, we're going to have to revise this document anyway, so everything's up in the air anyway.
So if we could you post a note to the list explaining the issue about the key swapping, and then we'll just incorporate that into we'll direct John and put that in the security considerations. We're not doing this. We're not sure of the risks, but here's what it is.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, as far as I can tell, what we are primarily arguing about is is speculative future simplicity of the code paths, depending on what we think is going to happen in the future. And if we think in the future we're going to end up having to have hash keys, then it's easier to have always hash keys. And if we think in the future we're going to have having largely unhashed keys, then it's easier to always have unhashed keys. So as I say, I think we all have our guesses on that, but I'm willing to defer to the consensus of the room. I guess I don't know how you want to. I haven't heard that many people talk about it, so I think you want to take a hum, or you want to like whatever. That's fine with me.
Sure.
I don't think we need to hum now. I'm happy to just let it go on the list and figure it out that way.
If we go post-quantum, we're probably going to be looking at a new version of SMTP, let alone TLS or whatever. Yeah. If you look at what it would take, it's basically everything goes out the window. So just don't bother about it.
UCPs. Bring back UCP.
Bring back.
Okay.
We're done with this one.
Yes, we are.
We're done with this one?
We're done with this. John, you know how to write it up in the about Martin's key exchange.
I mean, and I must say, it's a very clever thread. Is what I hadn't thought of until you mentioned it.
Right.
Okay.
I'll provide text. Before you disappear, John, because I was just about to ask you, are you done? The review that I wrote of the draft hit the list. I may have mentioned that I preferred hashing in it, and that caused an enormous.
It wasn't just you.
Rat hole. Yes. I don't know who started the particular thread, but we all piled on. There are a bunch of other comments in there that I think are really important.
Yeah, although it seems likely
that
we will break the draft up into separate pieces. So, like the comment, the stuff about deprecating SHA-1 is now in a different and more verbose draft.
That would be fine. Well, the more verbose thing is a problem that I'll get to later. But there were some comments in there that I think are pretty crucial, and I want to make sure that those don't get lost, particularly when we get things moving between documents.
Yeah, no,
so I want to close the loop on that.
Yeah, I missed the cutoff. Now that it's open again, I will stir them into the next version.
Okay, great, thanks.
No, not really. So this is kind of a strange thing to channel, but well, since I'm channeling anything, did anyone find a cell phone in this room at the beginning of remark? If so, please contact Karen O'Donnell.
So I also just, since I got this list a few minutes ago about the names of these things. Is it as well? Okay.
Yeah.
Both the DNS and the. Okay, good. Yeah. So if anybody, I think if anybody vehemently rejects the suggestion that the name should say 25519 rather than 256 and not just bear, then they should discuss it. But if not, people are going to.
Sold.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. Okay,
Anything else for yours? No. Okay.
run,
Um,
out of the square.
we have extra time too, so we're a little ahead of schedule since we started 10 minutes early. So you can ignore to some degree the time limits on these. All right. So the DKIM usage document is supposedly and probably the simplest of these. The changes, as I recall, are that we are deprecating use of SHA-1 entirely. We are increasing the floor, as Martin put it, for the number of bits and keys that we should be accepting to 1024. And there's a third thing that it escapes me at the moment. But essentially, this is an update to DKIM directly that doesn't add anything, but simply tightens up base requirements. Sorry? So Mike's going to talk about that one. So yes, that's all this is. Seth, who just mentioned something, is going to be shepherding this document. I think we're pretty close, modulo what we're about to talk about, to last calling this. It's a very simple update document. So go ahead, Martin.
So, Martin Thompson, there are a number of things that I had concerns with this document. I mean, what you have on the slide is exactly it. I think we should not do PSS in this document. Absolutely.
Okay.
That's a no-brainer. Then we have two things. And what you have right there is almost the sum total of the document, yet it somehow manages to be 5 pages. And
2 of those aren't our fault, but yeah.
Well, yes. But I think you might be able to get it down to 2. And I think that simply means providing some rationale for why the document exists, and then saying must not use SHA-1, must use keys of 1024 bits or higher, or maybe we can make it a little higher than that even. I think 1024 is perfectly reasonable at this point in time. The document currently includes a whole chunk of text from the DKIM RFC verbatim without modifying it. It's very confusing. We need to stop doing that.
Yep.
And the other thing is we don't need to modify the ABNF. We just have to tell people not to use those code points. And modifying the ABNF makes this document bigger and more complicated, and we have IONA considerations and all sorts of other things that really don't advance things. We just need to tell people, just stop using that. It's broken.
I think there was a idea put in someone's head that the way you deprecate something is to pretend like it never existed before.
Yeah, I think that's unnecessary.
I agree. So we'll fix it.
Yeah.
But like I said, I plan to get this last called in short order. There's really not much to it. There's no reason. Yep. Anything else on this one?
So I'm just trying to think about what the security properties of all this are. So the existing, so I'm just going to muse for a second if people will indulge me. The existing attacks on SHA-1 are all collision attacks, and we don't have any free image attacks yet. Maybe never. So the collision attacks, so I'm trying to think about, like, how do you exploit a collision in this system? And I think the way you exploit a collision in this system is, and ordinarily you say, like, well, it can't, because like it is all produced by the center. But I think the way you exploit a collision in the system is that, say you have like a mail relay that does spam filtering. And now what I do is I give you 2 messages, one of which, and I can control any of the input, right? But I give you 2 messages, one for you to sign that is innocuous, and isn't full of my pornography or whatever. And then I take the signature off and I shove it in my pornographic one. I don't know, like, if anybody's written down what you might actually be able to do with a collision attack on DKIM, but it might be worth someone thinking about that. I don't understand the system well enough to do that right now. The relevant point is that there are 2 important clocks. There's the clock when you stop making SHA-1 signatures, which is the one where collision attacks no longer become an issue. And there's the point where you stop receiving them, which is the point where pre-image attacks no longer become an issue. So it might be nice in one of these documents to say something about what we think the appropriate timescales for phasing out acceptance of SHA-1. Which I understand that we can't do for quite some time, but the browsers made a lot of noise. Remember, they're going to stop accepting SHA-1 certificates. So I wonder if we should say something at least about these. We expect that at some point in the future, with some vague time scale, we expect to actually say you should stop accepting them as well.
I think you just wrote our security considerations section.
If someone can actually, so as AD, I refuse to actually take any tokens, but if someone will remind me to do it, I will write something for you.
Okay, thank you.
You got that? Action curve.
Okay.
It'll be short, like the rest of the document.
Yeah, John Levine, apropos of the IANA stuff, in my draft, I moved SHA-1 to historic. Do we think that's a good idea?
Yes.
Okay. That would be one IANA change.
I thought this did that. Maybe that's the third thing I was.
That was in
missing.
my draft. I don't think it's in Scott's draft.
It should be in Scott's draft.
Okay.
So send him the text.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the reminder.
It's in my draft.
Well, I'm going to take it out of yours. And,
Yeah,
I think Martin Thompson, both drafts include a similar sort of modification. If there is a way for IANA to flag something as, do not use,
we have a
should
column.
exploit that.
We have a column in the registry we're talking about that says obsolete or current.
Yeah, that's fine. Do that.
This is Barry. I know some of the security-related, some of the crypto-related registries have things like should and should plus and something like that or whatever that says that the status is likely to change to be stronger in the next version. Let's not go there, says Martin. Okay, never mind.
Thank you, though.
yeah.
Yeah, John Levine. I mean, as far as when to stop accepting them, that's sort of more of a MOG issue because it's mostly. I mean, for 10 years we told people SHA-1 is bad, and it appears to be largely a matter of figuring out who's still signing with SHA-1 and beating up on them to see if we can persuade them to change, which is not really the IETF's remit, And I think, and I don't see how we can say anything other than the obvious, like stop accepting them when there's sufficiently few useful signatures.
Chris Newman, a concern I have about the document is I'd like to see actually must check the key size of the key is at least 24. Now, I don't care how you use the result of that. That can be up to policy, but you must check the key size. I noticed we had this problem in TLS implementations where things thought they were generating keys of the right size and they weren't, and it created interrupt problems. So I'd really like to get that check-in early.
Kurt Anderson, responding to John's comment about people accepting SHA-1. Yes, just the very fact that this draft is in flight provided a lot of leverage, and 3 of the major folks that were still actually sending SHA-1 were convinced last month to stop doing it and have stopped doing it in the month subsequent.
So going back,
one has stopped and the other 2 are moving in that direction.
So going back to DMARC, we don't need an experimental draft anymore, right? Martin.
Yeah, so Martin Thompson, I think perhaps I have a different spin on what Eka was suggesting. Maybe this document should simply say must not, and must not create or accept, and then it is a matter of policy for those who are deploying this, and we can have in the security considerations text about when those things might actually start to need to be enforced.
Is it okay if we say must not generate and then just let it wither away?
That is, I think, the essence of the thing. The challenge there is what Chris was talking about, which is that people end up generating 512-bit keys and signatures, and then you end up sort of in this situation. If people, I think it's a useful hammer for people to have in the sort of policy and deployment area to simply say the IETF said don't, and so we have a way people can use that in their communities to actually have the things happen. So.
All right, before we get to Phil, is there anyone in the room has an objection to saying don't generate, don't accept? Okay, good segue, Phil.
Yeah, I think that we should say it must not generate. On the acceptance side, it depends upon what you're going to be using them for. If you're using the signature as evidence of the message validity, as was used in the DNC attack, then of course, yes, you're looking at the semantics of the message and it really does matter. If, on the other hand, all you're doing is doing spam filtering, which was the original idea of DKIM, then, breaking a SHA-1 hash, breaking an RSA key, that looks more like a proof of work. If somebody's going to break a SHA-1 hash to get a message through my spam filter, maybe it's what. So I think in general, in terms of how the IETF works, if we go from must to must not on the receive side, I think it sends a bad signal to ourselves in that it tells us that we can tell the community to turn on a dime. And one of the things that I've been irritated with SHA-1 was that I was telling people to do SHA-2 like a year after it was published by NIST. And people ignored me. And then suddenly we have CAB Forum say, okay, we've got to get rid of SHA-1 and we've got to do it in 18 months. And so I don't like the idea that that's an acceptable thing to tell the community. So I think that going through the phase of must not create, may accept, and the discipline of realizing that we can't just yank algorithms out is useful because it will cause us to maybe be more careful in the future.
So it's interesting you're like an interesting counterpoint to what we've been hearing, which is the community asking us to give them a hammer by which they can hit themselves over the head to move forward. Like there's a certain amount of inertia that a must not accept will solve. And so you're actually, this is the first person to give, which is, it's not to say it's not valid, but it's they've been saying, could you please say must not? Could you please say must not? And we finally relenting, like, okay, we'll say must not. And now it's sort of the opposite perspective. It's interesting to hear both ways.
So Seth Blank, Valamel. Basically, it feels like we said should not in 2010 or before. And there's been plenty of time to do that. And the must, 2007, so a decade. And the must not language is what's necessary to hammer everyone else. It worked at MOG last month. We had, there are 3 major ESPs who I won't name and shame, but who were still signing with SHA-1. We talked to them, and they all said, with the threat of DCRUP and must not, we're just deprecating SHA-1 language, saying this is coming, the conversation's happening, right?
Okay.
All 3.
We don't need to keep going on about must not for too much longer, but go ahead.
Yeah, Martin Thompson, I think in response to PHP's comments, the key thing here is that the signature still exists and it can still be input into things like spam filtering and whatnot. And if we have the right text in the security considerations talking about when this matters, having the headline is still valuable. I think people are asking for the headline thing that's going to be in the body of the document, must not, blah, blah, blah. And then there's going to be some deployment considerations that say, that this is going to take some time and people are going to still be signing with them. And there's still value in having that signature there in some contexts. But I don't think we need to back away fully from this thing. And we have the should not already.
There's also a timetable from publication to when it actually gets approved as standard stock.
And then the code has to get written and deployed and taken.
We have this discussion in other working groups also with deprecating SHA-1, and in most of the cases you have to understand there's 2 different things we are talking about here. There's must not implement and must not use. Those are very different things. Implementers are actually the vendors who make those products. They hate must not implement because that means that they immediately, if they want to be conforming with this documentation, they have to remove the whole code, which means that then they can't have a backward compatible flag that say, oh yeah, but yeah, we have this product here that doesn't support it, so we have to have it, and they say, sorry, we can't do. If it must not implement, then you can have, like for example, OpenSSH has this, if you want to use Group 1 and SHA-1, you have to enable these flags to be able to use it, but you can still use it. Must not use is okay. I think that's something that we can say, but of course, usually we don't give instructions what you can use because we say that it's actually policy requirements for the people who are using it. Must not implement is really annoying in that sense. And if you say, oh, we must not with some kind of, oh, you can use it if you want it, it should not. It's not must not anymore. If you have any reason why you want to use it, then it should not with some reason, and it's always a good thing to say the reason why you want to, when you can use it, if it should not.
We'll cut the line after Kurt.
Yeah, Andreas Schulze. I only want to express my opinion about about must not and should not. I've the experience that all these should or should not in the IETF drafts also only are justification to not move forward. I more often wish that there is a must not also in that case. And everybody who can't follow that must not is free to not use IETF documents.
Yeah.
Kurt Anderson. So given that we all realize that there's a certain cadence to getting documents out and published and updated, maybe we can write a timetable for moving through these phases into the document. So as was suggested, we start off with a must not send, then we add, maybe we put a deadline next year, June of 2018, must not accept. And we write that into the document so that there's essentially a tripwire in there, and IANA changes the registration in June of next year that says must not accept. In the meantime, it's a should not, and it becomes a must not, and everybody can point to that. They both get the headline, as well as we don't have to do another document, and it just happens.
So what I've been hearing in the room so far is most people are in favor of just making it must not generate, must not accept.
Yes, yeah.
All right, let's take a hum. The question is, how many people are in favor of the document saying must not generate or accept, and how many people are not in favor, and how many people don't have enough info to decide? So, all in favor? All those opposed? All those who need more information? That seemed pretty strong in
There is
favor.
no other information.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, yeah. Standard escape hatch. We'll confirm it on the mailing list, but
We just have a vote.
AD, don't we have to confirm on the list? That's the way we do it in security.
That's not the point. The point is, it sounds like you just took a vote.
No, I wanted to know
The
what
people who
thought.
object, have their objections been aired and discussed? Or did
Yeah.
we just do a vote?
Okay, so Jim Fenton on Jabber says that he agrees with must not generate, but it's too soon for must not accept.
Alexi?
Well, you got the sense of the room, so you need to take it to the mailing list to make the final decision and let people the chance to object one way or the other. So it's okay to say there was a room consensus, rough consensus,
Right.
but it's no more than that.
Mhm.
Okay, so apart from the must not piece of this conversation, I think we've covered all the known issues with this draft. I sent her some of my own review comments. I'll get Scott to do a new version. He'll be able to see the notes of this or hear the transcript and figure out what else we discussed. But I do plan to get this sort of last call as fast as I can reasonably get it done without missing any important points. There's really not much to this left. The ECC, I don't think Scott is here. Is he, Scott Rose? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Scott Rose, NIST. Basically, I don't think this draft is needed anymore, mainly because there's a community out there that needs to also implement FIPS 140 stuff. Having some internal discussions, it seems now that there's actually a roadmap for this sort of thing to get EDDSA into FIPS 140. So things are kind of progressing, barring any kind of strange management stuff. So in effect, the actual reason this draft exists is gone. If there is a bunch of people that really, really, really like ECDSA over the ed curves, mention it on the list. And otherwise, I'm not going to work on this anymore.
We can label it dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
You got another 4 minutes. Sorry, I'm really sorry. I'm very, very sorry.
Do you want me to say it again?
No, that's not.
You'll lose it in the next year's budget cycle. Wow, that's actually seriously great news that 255.19 and will show up in FIPS. Cool.
No, you're on the hook now.
Yeah. It's not me.
We're going to work on the draft.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it.
The standard disclaimer here is that
you have to include the standard disclaimer that you're not making an announcement about future product, blah, blah, blah. Those,
We are done unless anybody else has other business for this working group. Okay, we may or may not see you in Singapore. Thank you, everybody. If you have not signed the blue sheet, where is it?
Who's got the blue sheet?
It's got to be there. So it's in the back.
Okay.
Thanks. Yes. If you haven't signed the blue sheet, please sign it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
What do I do with them?
Email leader.
Yeah, mail it to DCRUP chairs, and then we'll take a look and send this to us.
All right.
What I do you understand what I'm on about? One second. Or you can just mail it to the chairs back of us. They don't have any comments. Okay, no, I didn't understand. He basically said, raise your hand if you. Yeah.
So I don't think no, I won't, because I just want to get working less away than a month. Yeah, so it depends on when Scott does his update.
That's a.
Yeah.
Would it help if I send his draft?
I mean, I think it's like worth indicating what might happen, even though it's not.
When I sent a pull request before, and that was like,
Yeah, well, I mean, I was arguing about, I was arguing about must not for different reasons, not because I thought it was the wrong thing to do, but I could use it for, it's SHA-1 continues to drop. You saw that argument I was making. So I think me sorting that out sort of held him up for a while. So now I'm out of the way on that one, so I should be able to get something out of it reasonably quickly.
I recently looked at the 2119 update that we did, which is patch the document.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, just like you want to have happen. And,
Really, one objection is it's too.
Yeah, I think that keeps the boilerplate. I think the problem is
That one I think we could work.
people who are new to this sort of stuff, we work on bad examples. Right, so that's the case. That's why this is so bad.
I'm stopping on.
No, I'm set. Congratulations, you made your first time.
Yeah.
But I was just curious about the sort of vectors you were talking about.
I'm not sure that there's an effect there, but we're giving it any greater confidence.
Through my theory.
Basically, I've been looking at this. Basically, the 9 months of the vast majority of people sign with IETF don't actually